So Alex, we're going to start the process as normal. However, I've just been told that there are certain things that you would maybe like to say to me about what you're picking up, or not sure what it's about, in fact. So I want to give you green light to do that, if that feels authentic for you now. There might be something that you want to tell me about you, about the world, whatever it is. And I'm going to just put this a little bit further down still. And I realize that on some level, it is the higher energies which inhabit Alex's current beautiful, healthy body that may want to speak.
Yes, of course.
I understand that.
Yes, you need to understand, Vera, that we're all actually always here. In fact, Alexander has been using us in his day-to-day life, at work, at home, and it's been wonderful because it's giving us the experience here as well, which we love, we enjoy it.
Yes.
Okay, let me introduce us. So we are from the highest of the highest, Alex has already pointed out. Our oversoul is possibly one of the oldest oversouls in creation. We have experienced quite literally everything, and we come here to share that with humanity and with the world, with Gaia. At this very important time, this transition, such a beautiful time. We have done this countless times before, never the same, because every experience is new and unique. And it is our honor and our pleasure to come here and serve.
Yes.
Thank you, Vera. I would like to acknowledge you. You have been an instigator of something magnificent. It is at this time right now, at this moment in history, quite literally, in the, what are we in now, in the spring of 2016, when the energies are accelerating from third to fourth dimension, as Alex already knows. We have been pointing him to this information through certain channels, which is making it a lot easier for us to come through. We are of the 11 that you have previously spoken about. 11 oversouls to create it all. We are derived from God's God, from the source consciousness of source consciousness. We come here to bring new and refreshing energies, none other like the earth has ever seen before. It is magnificent. There are rules which do apply here. As a planet of free will, we cannot fully express ourselves until humanity allows it through its collective consciousness. More and more people are starting to wake up, and it's beautiful because we can see this transition happening. It is like a sunrise before the sun fully shines. When the sun fully shines, will we be able to express ourselves and let the world know that we're here, and that they are unique and that they are special, and congratulate them for the journeys which they have undertaken. All the hell and heavens which they have experienced here have been for this grand final closure, perhaps? No, not closure, continuation, but into a higher vibration, into a higher frequency. The people on this planet are heroes. They are beautiful, they are perfect, and we love them unconditionally.
How best would you describe or delineate the change in him?
That is a very good question, Vered.
Just so.
You told us the story previously about this man whose tumour was a Geiger counter.
Yes.
For his health.
Yes.
Alex's expression of us as a Geiger counter of the health of humanity. By allowing us to come through, symbolizes the accelerated pace at which humanity is evolving.
Yes.
I think that answers your question quite simply.
That's very, very special. That does explain so much. And if the being that we know as Alex is in some way a measure for this expanded and rather urgent consciousness that is growing.
May I ask why you're saying urgent?
I probably should not have used the word urgent. I think what I meant was dynamic. I think when I say urgent, it comes from my fear and my own personal desire for it to hurry up. So I totally admit that. Thank you. My concern is when you use Alex or look to Alex as a Geiger counter, as a measure of humanity's progress, is there any detrimental effect on his being or his body?
No, none whatsoever.
Okay. So ipso facto, is there a positive effect on his being?
Positive. It is what it is. It's a doorbell serves to be rung. A doorbell is what it is. It's not injured by the ringing. Neither is Alex.
Okay. Well, I'm wondering whether Alex, the experience of being Alex, is enhanced by this role?
From a third dimensional perspective, yes. From a higher perspective, from our perspective, no.
Mm-hmm. So from a higher perspective, not necessarily enhanced, but from
No.
the third dimensional, it would be experienced as an enhancement.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good. So if I may, I'm going to proceed with some of the questions, and I want to just again reiterate the joyousness of...
We wish to clarify this because we believe that it can cause some confusion why it doesn't enhance us but does in fact enhance him.
Yes, please. So it doesn't enhance that which is your consciousness, but
That's
it
correct.
does enhance that which is Alex's consciousness as experienced by him.
That's correct.
I see.
Thank you.
Okay. Because he spoke earlier about...
Okay, please let
Yes.
me explain.
Please.
Everything that is happening has already happened, so we have already experienced it from that point, that singularity.
Yes.
So we have already been enhanced by it, so these actions now don't necessarily enhance us any further because we've already been there and done that.
Of course, of course.
However, the third dimensional Alex is experiencing this now, and to him, as the veil is being lifted, it enhances his experience here in this third dimension, so it is very enhancing for him in his consciousness.
Thank you. That explains it so beautifully. Thank you so much for that. And we will need to be delineating from which level of consciousness the answers come throughout this session.
We will do our best through him to delineate knowledge effects, third dimension or higher dimensions as it comes through.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Through having heard a voice, as it were, to be the imperfect father at times, but to still be in his mastery. What can you tell him about that to give him verification? How can he reconcile that apparent?
It has already
opposition?
been reconciled. He understands this. He's already explained this to you, that he can see the human side of him and the higher self side of him, the us side of him, the I am side of him. Sometimes he does get caught up in the day-to-day activities of his life, but he is very quick to bring that understanding back into his conscious mind and know that it's okay to live his third dimensional life as he chooses, whilst experiencing life in higher dimensions with us and allowing us to bring our information forth.
So he has unlimited free will in how he expresses three-dimensionally?
Yes. Yes. This is something which we cannot interfere with. We have created the law of free will, and we are not hypocrites. We would not violate that law for our own gain.
I understand. You want to violate for your own gain, yeah.
Why I say that is because we, like you, want this to happen as quickly as possible, because we see the fruits, we see the joy which is coming, and we wish that humanity would hurry up as well. We know it will happen, but it is so beautiful that for it to happen at this moment in time, for humanity to experience this explosion of love right now would be wondrous, but we cannot interfere. We know it will happen, but it is up to humanity as to when.
Yes.
Now, you had questions about the 36.
Yes.
We can share this knowledge.
That would be wonderful. When I don't remember the details of what came to me that night, but I do remember that it happened, and it was quite a surprise to me. And I think Alex went on to do a bit of research about it, but...
Yes. We have been communicating with him. The Tzadikim, as it is known as in the Jewish Kabbalah,
Yes.
in the ancient spiritual knowledge. There are texts. I believe it's the Zohar.
Yes, correct. And what is Alex's, that which we know as Alex, what is the connection with the 36? 36 Tzadikim, what is his connection with that work?
We created the 36 to hold balance on the earth.
Yes.
36 itself is an expression. It is a divine number, which is why it was used by the script or by the channel who wrote it down. It doesn't necessarily mean that there are 36 people. There are 36 forms of energy, but those 36 forms of energy may inhabit multiple people. For example, there may be hundreds of people holding these 36 energies, depending on the era in which the earth was in at that point in time.
I see.
You see, balance is crucial. Without balance, the earth itself would implode and humanity would need to be destroyed and start over again, similar to what happened in Atlantis. To prevent that from happening, we needed a means to make sure that the balance never dipped below its critical point to result in the annihilation of humanity. We thus created the 36, these energies, to hold the balance of humanity while it delved into these lower vibrations so that it wouldn't need to be destroyed, so that the time that is now is here.
Yes.
And humanity can experience itself evolving into higher states of consciousness. You see, it's very risky business when you're dealing with low vibrations, especially when you want them to come out of it by themselves without outside help.
Yes.
So these Tzadikim were not here to assist with the evolution of humanity. They were here to hold the balance so that humanity had enough time to evolve itself.
I see. And because you've made it very clear here, and that's quite an interesting development, that it's not necessarily literally 36 people, but 36 forms of energy.
Yes. We wish to talk about Christ and his connection with Christ.
Yes, please go ahead.
Sananda, who is also known as Yeshua, who is also known as Christ, Jesus the Son, came here as a boost. He is equivalent to the accelerator which allowed humanity to move forth a lot quicker to this point in time. We trained Sananda before he came here, and we were so grateful when he decided to incarnate. And when we say he, that is not entirely accurate, because it was a complete feminine masculine entity which entered the body of Yeshua. It was a complete wholeness. So Yeshua was in the highest sense androgynous, even though he did have children.
There's been evidence that has come forth through various later Gospels that the man known as Judas, or Yehuda in Hebrew.
Judas was a friend of Jesus, and it distraughts us that he was portrayed as a betrayer.
Thank you. This is what I wanted to ask you.
Jesus asked Judas to go and tell them where he was so that they wouldn't ransack everything in his family.
Yes. So he asked Judas to tell the Romans
Yes.
to protect his family? Okay.
He asked Judas to go to the Jewish high priests
Yes.
to advise them where he was, where we were, so that they wouldn't go door knocking and kidnapping.
Yes.
He wanted it done quickly so that he could protect his family and he could protect those he taught.
And have we reached a time in the evolution of our history where this information could come forth?
This information has been slowly coming forth, but very few people are listening.
Why is there such cognitive dissonance in people to hear this?
Because people are very creatures of habit. The awakening is happening, but there is also a fear of letting go of the past.
Yes.
There is also a fear that by acknowledging Judas as a saint, that there is an acknowledgement of the darker side to love. People are afraid of that.
So clearly the knowing of such information, which is such a revisionism and a correction of history, could this have a positive effect in the world ultimately? And I know you've explained the fear that people have of letting go.
Ultimately, the short answer is yes.
Okay. Okay. One of Alex's questions.
There's been a lot of misconceptions in the history of the world.
Yes.
There's been a lot of misunderstandings because of humanity's third dimensional perspective. When things are starting to be seen at the higher perspective, at the higher dimensions, humanity will realize that everything has happened exactly the way it should. You see, the universe, this universe, is clockwork. Everything happens at the precise time it's meant to happen. When the entity known as Judas incarnated here, it knew that it was going to suffer this, in inverted commas, humiliation for millennia.
Yes.
But it was okay with it. It was okay with it because it knew that it would be part of an awakening. Without Judas's contribution to history, humanity could not be where it is now.
Okay.
When people start realizing the higher purpose of what happened, and people start awakening to the truth and not the lies which have been told in revisions of these holy scriptures. And I say holy very loosely because everything that comes through this world is blessed and holy in its own right. When people start seeing the truth and acknowledging the truth, it will be a next step in the conscious evolution of this species.
Oh, that's wonderful. All right.
There are certain entities which are trying to keep this information at bay and that are trying to wipe out the bloodline of Christ. This is part of the reason why World War II happened and why the Jews were targeted.
Can you explain that? Why were the Jews targeted?
Because the bloodline of Christ runs through the Jews logically.
Yes.
So by wiping out the Jewish race, logically, it was thought that they would wipe out the bloodline of Christ.
Was this the understanding and intention of the Nazis?
That was the intention of the Nazis, although there were higher entities at play. The Nazis were just a tool. Hitler was just a tool.
And yet 6 million were exterminated, but it did not result in the wiping out of the bloodline, is that right?
No, of course not. They were very narrow-minded.
One of Alex's questions is to try and understand why there has been persecution of the Jewish people even long before World War II. And this is an area studied by so many great thinkers. The offering that you have given, one of the offerings is about the need to wipe out that bloodline. Is there any other reason that you can share with us tonight?
The Jewish believe themselves to be a chosen people.
Yes.
With that choosing comes a sacrifice.
What is that sacrifice?
The humiliation they have suffered. The Jewish community, the Jewish people are in a position now where if they use their energies correctly, can advance all of humanity into the fifth dimension at a very, very high rate. By publicly forgiving all of their persecutors throughout history and letting go of those energies, they can almost immediately restore balance to the whole of humanity.
This is very interesting because some of those who represent that suffering and torture have apologized to the Jewish people. For example, the King of Spain, the Pope, the former Pope, the Polish Pope. And what you're suggesting is that the Jewish people themselves can help progress the world by forgiving all their persecutors. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Religion is a very sensitive topic to a lot of people and has been the reason for a lot of conflict on this world, which we have seen over the millennia, over the time, over the history of this planet, over the history of this particular incarnation of human consciousness.
Yes.
The roots of all religions are one and the same. They have splintered off into many, which is fine, because that is the way it needs to be, so that human 3D consciousness can understand concepts of higher dimensions. That is the intention of these religions. That is the intention of the Jewish. That is the intention of the Christian Gospels, the Quran, the Tao Te Ching, all the other holy scriptures in these worlds are here to bring forth higher consciousness and need to be read from that perspective. When read from a literal perspective, from a lower vibration, they can also be interpreted in certain ways which can appear evil,
Yes.
or can appear warlike, to create havoc into this world. And that is what these lower dimensional beings are using. They are tapping into these lower dimensional frequencies of these higher dimensional texts to release fear into this world, to keep the vibration low. Rest assured that it will all work out in the end. As soon as these souls leave this planet, they will not be allowed back on.
Has this happened before in the
Yes.
history of the earth, that certain souls will not be allowed back home?
Yes, yes. The time of Atlantis was one point in history where certain entities wanted to keep the population of the planet at that point in time at a low frequency, at a low vibration, which is when they started to manipulate the dark arts, so to say,
Yes.
which led to the fall of Atlantis at that time. Things were very different back then. The Tzadikim, the 36 energies which we spoke about previously, did not exist there. They were a fail-safe for this version of humanity.
I see.
Humanity, the population that existed back then, had a lot more abilities in terms of their psychic and telekinesis. They were a lot more in tune with their potentiality, not necessarily their higher selves or their higher state of consciousness, but with their abilities to manifest into this reality. Unfortunately, they were abused, and it caused their downfall, which we witnessed. We did not want that to happen again, which is why this version of humanity has these fail-safes. So rest assured that it will not happen again.
So the 36 Tzadikim are a kind of fail-safe.
Yes. They are a keeper of the balance.
And is there any significance in the name Eli for Alex? Is there any connection with Elijah, Eliyahu? We call Eliyahu in Hebrew, Elijah in English. What is the significance of El?
Elijah was from another place. He was another being from another star system who came
Yes.
here. In fact, the chariots of fire that appeared when he ascended was a craft which brought him back to his mothership.
Yes.
That is what people perceived.
Is that why he had those abilities?
Yes.
And
Superhuman, some would call them.
yes.
That entity then reincarnated as John the Baptist, which reincarnated as Merlin. Elijah was also the soul of Elijah was also the mentor of the soul of Sananda.
Alex had an experience recently, a few months ago,
Yes.
where he seemed to be asleep, but
With
had a
the
recall.
yell.
Yes, with the Could you please explain this experience? What is the relevance of these craft, the triangular craft with lights? If it is to his highest good to know this tonight.
Oh, it is. All his questions have in fact already been answered. This is just articulating them into this reality. He knows the answer. He has not been able to speak them because he has not known how to articulate them.
I understand.
The Ayel. The Ayel. The Ayel. There is a lot more happening here on this planet than just humanity. There are other species around this galaxy, around this universe, which are dying and which need help. Excuse us.
Yes.
The so-called grey aliens, which are known by mainstream media, are in fact one of them. There are many facets to this species. Just like there are many facets of humanity, there are many facets of these greys. And one facet of these greys shares a lineage with humanity, which means that they are compatible genetically.
I see.
Now, because this facet of these grey aliens have requested help to not die out because they are unable to reproduce, they have been cloning for a millennia, and their cloning abilities are starting to produce defects into new offspring.
Oh, I see.
It has also meant that their emotional bodies have been suppressed so that they appear to not have emotions. There was an agreement with humanity because of their compatible DNA, their compatible genetic makeup, to mix these two species so that the greys may live on.
Yes.
The Yell are a manifestation of this breeding program which has happened.
So sometimes he's gone on board and other times you've come to him.
Yes.
And would you do this while he's sleeping?
Yes, for the most part. We have been allowing some of these experiences to seep into his conscious mind because this is what he has asked for, which is why we showed the lights.
Yes, and this beautiful craft, this
Yes.
triangular craft with the
yes.
lights. What colour are those lights?
They were white, very, very bright white.
And may I ask, could we have a look inside one of those beautiful crafts?
Oh yes, of course you may.
Okay, so could you tell us where the entry point is to
Well,
that particular type of craft?
people are generally beamed on from the bottom.
Yes.
The energies allow demolecularization of matter and reconstitution of matter within the craft. While that is happening, the soul merely travels by itself so that it can reintegrate into the body. So there is actually a separation of traveling between the soul and the human aspect, the physical manifestation.
So that
Once on board the craft, there is generally a party waiting. People, when I say people, we mean different entities, light beings, different races. Welcoming, there is a welcoming, there's a gathering, there is a welcoming that this person is coming on board so that they can give up part of themselves for their benefit. It is an
Yes.
ultimate sacrifice, and it is beautiful.
Is it possible for you to allow Alex to see inside the craft now? Could you show him what it looks like inside?
Of course.
Okay.
Of course, this is a wonderful experience for Alex, because by saying of course he is giving us permission to do it. You see, the free will aspect of him at times prohibits us because of his own doubts.
Yes.
But he is slowly starting to let that go, which means that we can now bring this information forward. So thank you, Alex.
Good.
And thank you, Mary.
And we know that you absolutely understand why we here on the third dimension have issues about remembering. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So he's letting go of doubt and fear. Very good.
Okay, so there is a white light in this craft. There is energy, a lot of energy. Okay, so it is its own entity in a sense. It is a hybrid between the craft and the occupants, but it is also a separate craft. So there is a symbiotic relationship between the occupants and the craft, but they are also separate entities.
And when you say symbiotic, do you mean that even their thoughts can impact?
Oh yes, of course. The craft is alive, just like the occupants are alive, and it reacts to the occupants' thought. You see, the occupants love the craft. Like, not love the craft as in someone loves a gelato. They love the craft as in someone loves a child.
Yes.
They nurture the craft. And by that nurturing, the craft provides them with their necessities in their environment. It understands exactly what they need, and it manifests what they need instantaneously.
Yes.
The wonderful thing about this craft is that it is an experience which everyone experiences differently. So as some may see green, others may see purple, because that is what they wish to experience. Now, from a third dimensional perspective, the craft appears as the triangular shape which Alex drew earlier.
Yes.
That is merely a third dimensional representation, a third dimensional reflection of the higher dimensional existence of this craft. This third dimensional expression is really a portal to travel to this fifth dimensional craft. Interesting. So the craft does live on the fifth dimension. Okay.
This is where it resides.
Yes.
And it is able to come into the third dimension at times.
Yes, that is correct. That is why people can see it.
Why is it that some people can see it and others can't?
Because it depends on your vibration. It also depends on your intentions. You see, from a soul perspective, let me start that again. From a human perspective,
Yes.
there are those that are afraid of these sorts of existences beyond this planet. They're afraid of aliens and UFOs because of mainstream media and because of people's perceptions of what happens to them.
That's right.
So by that, they do not see the craft because that reflects into their soul's intentions to not allow them to see the craft. I wish to clarify here that there are some people who are afraid to see the craft and believe they don't believe in these aliens and extraterrestrial technology, but in fact from a soul perspective and from an intuitive perspective they do, and from that intuitive perspective they give permission to themselves to see the craft.
Yes.
Which is why when these people have these experiences they are so afraid, because they don't understand it from a third dimensional perspective.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
It does. Very, very much. Thank you for that answer. And I'm wondering, could you show us what form does Alex take when he enters the craft?
He is a light being.
Yes.
However, he is also himself, the body which you see in front of you now when he is manifested there physically.
Okay.
He also has a grey body which he inhabits at times, and
Yes.
that grey body manifests from the 8th dimensional aspect of him.
Yes.
That is the oversoul of those who are performing this hybridization program. So it is a third dimensional aspect of an 8th dimensional reality through which he exists.
A third dimensional aspect
of an 8th dimensional reality.
Yes.
Alright?
Do you understand?
I think I do. I don't understand intellectually, but I understand on a gut level.
Okay. I want you to think of a sphere. Okay?
Yes?
Think of a sphere. Now think of a piece of paper.
Yes?
Okay? Now think of the sphere going through the piece of paper. The sphere is third dimensional, the paper is second dimensional.
Yes?
Think of yourself as a second dimensional being. When the sphere is not touching the paper, you would not see it. When the sphere is touching the paper, you would see it, but as a circle, from your second dimensional perspective.
Yes?
Okay? The same analogy applies here. So what is actually happening with this grey, which is Alex, when he is aboard that ship, that body which is the soul aspect that is of this 8th dimension is in fact happening. It is the 8th dimensional aspect manifesting itself in a third dimensional reality as this third dimensional body.
I see.
So it is equivalent to your 2-dimensional self seeing a third dimensional reality in a 2-dimensional way as a circle, when it in fact is a sphere when you look at it in its true form.
Could you show Alex now the version of himself in the 8th dimension for him to have a visual?
Yes.
Could you show him this beautiful being?
Yes, of course, yes, okay. Oh, okay, yes. So,
How would you
Hello.
describe what you see?
okay. It is a purity, it is a pure white light
Yes.
with an elongated face,
Yes.
eyes. Okay, alright, okay. What is happening, it is trying to express itself in the best way possible so that the third dimensional brain of Alex can comprehend it. This itself is an expression. This itself is not the entity, because it is impossible to grasp fully what the 8th dimensional being is on third dimensional consciousness reality.
Okay.
It is literally impossible. It cannot be done.
So
No
this
one-
is some kind of representation.
It is a representation, and the representation is the purest of the purest white light with an okay, you're coming, okay. Yes, so it is a long grey being, but with white. It is a white being that looks like a grey, but it's elongated.
Yes.
It is tall, slender, very, very divine, and very, very loving.
And what are his movements like?
Very slender, very like elastic.
Yes.
Oh,
Can-
he's waving.
He's waving. I wanted to ask you to engage with him.
Yes, he's waving. He's okay. Apparently, I have a sense of humour.
Is there any last message for Alex?
We wish to convey a thank you and a congratulations to all parties here, to you, Vered, and to Alex, because the threshold has now been passed where we can now come forth freely and reveal ourselves to humanity.